wait just a damn minute.
Hang
Is
on, I
that
don't think
like Jim Acosta swag? What are you wearing?
it is. Check it out.
Nice.
You
I
know,
gotta have one of them.
we're coming up in the world.
In political, and we're going to talk a lot about politics today, but in
Sure.
political world, you
Yeah.
should know that we call that the chachkis.
The tchotchkes, absolutely.
Yeah,
We
so
got
this,
shirts, we got mugs, we got hats.
and as
Actually, I don't have that many, but you know, I printed up some.
when you know who loved the tchotchkes was one Bernard Sanders.
I bet he did. I bet he
Ooh.
did.
The first time I'm going to speak out of school here, and this is why you joined the Rocha Revolutions. We pull the curtain back on lots of things, but the first time Bernie ever cussed at me was to talk to me about bumper stickers. He said, Chuck, Jeff said you're in charge of the bumper stickers. And I want to know why we can't get the bumper stickers at every rally. Everybody should have a bumper sticker. If they come to my rally, they leave with a bumper sticker. And he used some choice words, and I said, Bernie, you'll never, ever have to worry about running out of bumper stickers ever again. We will have bumper stickers and have more bumper stickers than you can ever deal with. So,
and he ended up liking, I mean, he ended up needing a lot of bumper stickers. I mean, you know.
Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of bumper stickers went out the door. As I said, we did never run out of bumper stickers ever again. Now, for those of you who are joining, I know you probably watch Jim's show, you watch my show, and Jim has been going hell to the walls around holding this administration accountable. He was live this weekend at the monstrosity of a parade that we had here in D.C. that ruined all of our streets that mine and Jim's taxpayers pay for. But who cares? Let's have a parade where nobody goes, but we tear up our streets. So Jim's been holding all of the politicians accountable, mainly Donald Trump, about all the crazy stuff. And today, I want y'all to get to know my good friend, Jim Acosta. And so I've got a couple questions. This is not Barbara Walters. You don't have to get your tissue out. But I think
I got it handy just in case.
I think it's important because you're such a unique story in journalism. I'm a unique story in politics. I think we all have our own unique way in every way. Explain to the viewers how this Cuban kid who's got this father who came from Cuba ends up in Northern Virginia, and then you living here in the D.C. area. I know you traveled around with different jobs, but this was home base, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was born in Fairfax County Hospital in a lowly manger. No, I'm just kidding. Fairfax County Hospital, which technically is right outside the Beltway. I think it might be half a mile outside the Beltway. And the reason why I was born here is my dad came over in 1962, 3 weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was 11 years old when he left Cuba. My aunt, my Cuban aunt, Annabelle, she had come over before my dad and my grandmother, and she saw that, okay, things are getting serious down there. So she went down to Cuba. She got my dad. She got my grandmother. They got on a Pan Am flight. My dad still has the passport. Actually, I think I still have the passport of his when he was 11 years old. They stamped it. They gave it to him. Off he went with my grandmother. They landed in Miami. I've documented all of this through, DHS records and immigration records and so on. And they stayed in Miami for, I think, a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And then they moved up to Northern Virginia, where there was a small little Cuban enclave that was building in Northern Virginia. It was like Falls Church, Vienna, that kind of area of Northern Virginia. People who are locals know what I'm talking about.
Did they know people up here?
They knew people up here. Yeah, there were already some Cubans up here that had moved up here. Remember at that time, I mean, it was a very different time from an immigration standpoint. Cubans were fleeing communist dictatorship in Fidel Castro. The United States was welcoming Cuban refugees at that time. Now, when they came here, obviously they saw some racism and anti-immigrant attitudes here and there. But, my dad tells this story about how, he and my grandmother, they were here for their first winter in D.C., and there was a local Presbyterian church in Vienna, Virginia that gave them coats and sweaters because it was the first time they'd ever been through something like that.
And winter.
And it was this was not Havana. This is not a Havana winter, where it might get down in the low 60s, but They got through their first winter. And then my dad also tells me about how there was a local teacher at the Vienna Elementary School who would pull him out of class, help him learn how to read and write, that sort of thing. So my immigration story on my dad's side is one of, he received a lot of, compassionate, welcoming, kind of heartfelt support when they came into the U.S. and moved up here to the D.C. area. My mom was already here in the D.C. area. She was born in Washington. She was living in Northern Virginia. Her parents were kind of tied to the Pentagon. My grandfather died actually when she was 2 years old, but he had fought in World War II. And my grandmother, she was raising my mom and I think 4 other kids in that area at the time. She met my dad. Lo and behold, they had me. So that's why I grew up in the DC area. But yeah, as you mentioned, I as a reporter, I moved all around the country. But DC has always been home for me.
And was your mother Cuban?
No, my mom is Irish and Czech. So I'm a mutt. I'm an American mutt. Her name is Barbara Acosta, but her middle name, her maiden name is Rice. So when she married my dad, her last name was Rice. So it was kind of like black beans and rice, when those two got together. But she raised me pretty much. My parents split up when I was very young. My mom raised me as basically a single mom. My dad stayed in the picture. He was in the DC area. I still hung out with my dad all the time. But my mom, she's also, I talk about my dad a lot. My mom's one of my heroes because she basically raised me on her own as a single mom, back in the 70s and 80s in Virginia. That was not, a picnic, you know what I mean? So she had to work hard. She worked in restaurants. My dad worked in Safeway grocery stores. So I'm just kind of a blue collar kid with a very, immigrant background. My mom's side of the family came through Ellis Island. And a lot of New York roots. Her great grandparents were in New York, and so I see it as as an all American kind of story. I mean, to me, that's what America's all about.
I could not agree more, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. My mother was 15 when I was born, and she was Irish, Welsh, Scottish, and my father was Mexican, his people
Yeah.
from Guanajuato. And my dad left when I was 5, and my mama raised me and my little sister, and she said she had 2 kids and was divorced and wasn't old enough to get in a nightclub.
Wow.
And in rural East Texas, I think these strong women, and she would have been raising me in the 70s. I was born in December of 68. That's right. All this white hair on my face is real. And I think these women back in the day, 2 things stick out to me when you tell that story. One is the amazing lives that we get to live now on behalf of the things that our mothers built us into. My father was around growing up like yours was, but my mother really raised me and my grandparents. But then also the story you told, and I think it dovetails into what you're fighting now, which is the way immigrants, even U.S. citizens, people that are on temporary status who have papers, quote unquote, that are getting treated like shit, just to be honest, when my grandparents, your father, your grandmother came here, and it was a different time. When people say to us and say to me and you, Jim, well, my family came the right way. Well, back then it was only one way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that complicated.
Right.
And we've made it very complicated to where people who wanted to have the same dream that my grandparents and your father had, which was to come to a country and one day be able to see their son, Jim Acosta, at the White House, holding a president accountable, asking him questions on behalf of all the people. Chuck Rocha getting to be on TV and be a political consultant and run presidential campaigns. Like we're living the greatest dreams of our ancestors because people welcomed us in. But now we're trying to make all immigrants into what just 1/100th of 1% of troublemakers may be, because it's politically expedient to win some kind of political victory, Jim. Is that what they're doing? Like, it's just disgusting what I see in comparison to how this church welcomed your father, and as just one example.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously Trump and people on the far right, they're demonizing immigrants for political gain. When he gets into political hot water, he always goes back to immigration. That's what he does. It's one of his tells. And he has some people, inside the administration working for him, inside the White House, people like Stephen Miller, who are absolutely white nationalist zealots. And, I think to some extent, this is personal for Trump. I don't know what his deal is. He seems to not like the idea of what America's becoming. For as much as he likes to hug the American flag, you have to wonder, would he hug the American flag 50 years from now when this is a more diverse country? He's not going to be able to stem that tide. There's just no way to do that. And so, some of it's politics, Chuck, but I think some of it's personal. To go out there and say we're going to deny people due process rights, to go out there and order ICE to get 3,000, deportations going, or raids going, or detentions going, every day, every week, something like that. I think every day. Just these insane quotas that they're setting, deporting mixed status families. Sometimes the mother's undocumented, but the kid is a U.S. citizen. And a couple of cases, I think they've had cancer. I mean, at some point, do you have a heart? Do you have a soul? Are you a human being? Or are these brown-faced people with Hispanic last names just pawns in your little game? I mean, and I think, to me, it's one of the real tragic things that's been happening over the last 10 or so years. And keep in mind, you were just saying a few moments ago, Chuck, that, when our folks came over, it wasn't as complicated. It wasn't as difficult. That's true. My dad came over, had refugee status. Look what the Trump administration is doing now to the Cubans and the Venezuelans, taking away their temporary protective status, deporting Cubans, deporting Venezuelans. Some notable Cubans are getting rounded up, kicked out of the country. That's not the environment that my dad came into. And we had a bill that was making its way through Congress in 2024 that would have fixed a lot of these issues, would have streamlined the immigration process, so you would have more people trying to get into the country legally, not illegally. And Trump, got rid of that because he knew it was not going to be to his advantage politically speaking. So, my attitude is when they're starting to wrestle to the ground Hispanic senators, when they are roughing up Democratic lawmakers and politicians, and they're smashing car windows and pulling abuelas out of their cars and stuff like that, when they're doing nasty, mean, awful shit like that, it needs to be called out. And I think it needs to be called out for what it is. And I think it's a very racist policy that the government has embarked on. And I think it really calls into question, what's in their hearts. And there have been other folks who have been, criticized for this. Tara Moran's been criticized for this, but I think it's the right question. What is it with these guys? Why do they have this thing? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I think that they play off of the worst fears of many Americans that aren't, that it's politically expedient to blame others. And let's be clear.
Yeah.
That throughout our country's history, there were always others, but there wasn't the internet. There wasn't fake things out there. There wasn't AI. There wasn't all this other stuff. Even when the Irish came, I would remind folks, the Irish are not welcome here, or the Italians, because they were kind of dark-skinned. And so the history of this goes back a long way, but what you see it now is on steroids. But it is very refreshing to know that, when I tell my dad and my mother's immigration story, they met at a Baptist church. My mother was teaching preschool Bible study she more or less was running the daycare for little kids, but they called it Bible study for little kids. And
sure.
My daddy was there because his brother was the choir director. So you have this immigrant kid and this white woman, and they meet at a Baptist church and they start a family together. It don't work out. It don't always work out for young couples in their teens, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
But, I got to live the dream, and you've got to live the dream. And now I think that more people that are like us. So when I say like us, we represent different groups of Americans, but we are mixed race. We come from all different sectors of the world. Yeah. Our mothers are probably closer connected than our fathers, because you have one from Cuba, one from Mexico, but both of our mothers come from Europe. And so I think this melting pot that you described of who we choose as partners and who we love, like love who you want to love, no matter the color of their skin. My beautiful wife is a Black woman from D.C. who's fifth generation, who gets to teach me things about what it's like to be a Black woman in D.C. every single day. And I grow as a person. It makes me bigger. It makes me understand things, and not just bad racist things. Of course, there's race, but wonderful history that if I lived in my little cocoon I would never know that, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of the Cancúns and the Cancúns, tell me about high school in Virginia. Did you play sports or were you a nerd and in the debate class?
Oh man, a little bit of both, honestly. I did play high school football, but I didn't play a lot. I don't think I was just that good enough, and I wasn't big enough. I kind of got taller and bigger when I got into college. It might have been all the beer I was drinking, but
See, now we're getting to the truth.
but I was also on the high school newspaper, and I think that's where I caught the journalism bug. And growing up in the DC area, you do catch the journalism bug. I mean, my mom got the Washington Post delivered to her doorstep every morning. She would read it cover to cover. And I think that's kind of where I started to get my, news bug. And, I got on the high school newspaper. It was at Annandale High School in Northern Virginia. And the name of the high school was, or the name of the newspaper was the A Blast, because we were the Annandale Atoms. With all this nuclear stuff in the news. I guess, I don't know if that ties back to anything, but anyway, but one of the very first stories that I did on the high school newspaper was about this mural of the Statue of Liberty, of all things.
No.
It was over my shoulder, that had been painted over. Oh no, wait a minute. I'm telling the story wrong. It was a Pink Floyd mural, excuse me, a Pink Floyd mural that was painted over, and everybody wanted to know what happened to the Pink Floyd mural. And as it turns out, the French teacher had it removed and they painted the Statue of Liberty over it. That's the story I was trying to tell. And so I always thought, that's kind of a funny story to think back on, in that, I've kind of like tried to be an advocate for immigrants, and, I bring up the Statue of Liberty quite a bit. But anyway, I wrote a story about it during that time at the high school newspaper, and it was my first big investigative story. I tried to get to the bottom of what happened to the Pink Floyd mural. Because at Annandale High School, we had a Billy Idol mural, we had a Pink Floyd mural. They let the kids put up these rock and roll bands as murals, I guess, to make the high school more cool, so you'd want to go to high school. But the French teacher wanted to paint over the Pink Floyd one so they could put up the Statue of Liberty, which I guess at the end of the day is a good idea.
What year was this? In the late 80s?
This was 1989. And I still have some of those copies of the A Blast around, so I don't know. I'll have to go dig them up one of these days. But I think that's where I did my first, cut my teeth for the first time.
I was thinking about when Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall came out. It was earlier than that, when it was Teacher, Leave Those Kids Alone. That's probably
Hey, Teacher, Leave Those Kids Alone. Absolutely. Another Brick in the Wall. And I think that might have been the mural. Was it Another Brick in the Wall? That might have been the mural. But yeah, that was painted over. All the kids were pissed. Yeah, somebody's asking, still Floyd in 89? Yes. Come on, classic rock back then. Absolutely.
What did you only play one sport, which was football?
I played Little League baseball. I played a little soccer, a little basketball. I just, I played tennis. I still play tennis to this day. I just was not much of an athlete. I wanted to be. I grew up a huge Washington Redskins fan. And we didn't have the Nationals back then. You had to drive up to Baltimore to see the Orioles. But we were huge Redskins fans. And to this day, my mom still puts out all of her OG Redskins paraphernalia in the living room. And it's got to be set up specifically in just the right spot where she feels like it messes up the juju, like from the movie Silver Linings Playbook, where De Niro, the Eagles fan, has to have all the Eagles stuff in just the right spots. My mom is basically the same way. She's superstitious in that the Redskins stuff has to be laid out in a certain way, or she worries that the Redskins are going to lose. Now we call them the Commanders. But so that is the sick, demented passion that I have is for NFL football. When NFL preseason gets going, I turn into a nut, and all I do is worry about NFL football and the Commanders.
So 2 questions about the NFL. First, tell me if you can remember the first time you ever went to a Washington Redskins football game.
Oh, God. I remember my dad taking me to some preseason games when I was a kid. My mom took me to a Redskins and Cowboys game. That was in the early 90s, I think. But my God, we used to watch them all the time when they were winning those Super Bowls. It was in 83, 88 or 89, I think, and then 93. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Some football fan out there will correct me, but that was when they won those 3 Super Bowls. Was the 82 season, the 88 season, and the 92 season, I believe. Might have been the 87 season. But anyway, I remember school would close and you would go down to the National Mall, and they would have the Washington Redskins victory Super Bowl parade go down Constitution Avenue, and people would be climbing the trees. And so that was the perfect time to be a Redskins fan. I feel bad because I made my kids become Redskins fans, and I felt so terrible for them for years and years because they were so shitty during the 2000s and the 2010s. I guess except for that year when RG3 was lighting up. But now they're finally good again with Jaden Daniels. So I'm very excited about that. So,
and for those of you who want to know, they all played those games back in the day at the old RFK Stadium.
The old RFK Stadium.
That is in the city of D.C. Yeah. And it may or may not be a few blocks behind the home that I'm reporting from live here. I live in that neighborhood.
Also, yeah, your real estate value is about to shoot through the roof here any day now.
My wife, who is elected here in Washington, D.C. as an ANC commissioner, represents, Jim, the RFK campus.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's in her single-member district for the area neighbors. So she's been dealing with the team on if they come back, what does that look like, and what does the neighborhood get in return? There's a lot of anti-stadium folks and some pro-stadium folks directly in the shadows of the stadium. But I just told her when she cut her deal with them to make sure that me and Jim gets a box.
Well, exactly. And I'm going to say right now, I'm throwing objectivity out the window. I am very pro RFK being remade into the new Commanders football stadium, because honestly, where it is right now out in Maryland, it is such a pain in the ass to get to that stadium. And I hope and pray that they need to do what's right, put things right, and blow up the old RFK Stadium, build it a brand new one. I think it would just be a great thing for the nation's capital.
Who, if you said, to put you on the spot, who is the all-time best Washington Redskin ever to touch the field?
Ooh, oh my gosh. I'd have to say John Riggins. It's got to be Riggo. He was the running back who had that classic run for touchdown. And I think whatever the Super Bowl was when they beat the Miami Dolphins. And there's, an iconic photograph of Riggins running down the field and this Dolphins player just kind of falling by the wayside as he galloped for a touchdown. I believe it was number 44. I'm almost positive he was number 44. Anyway, he was my favorite Redskin growing up. I mean, obviously I love Joe Theismann. I love Art Monk. I love the Hogs. I mean, Dexter Manley, the Fun Bunch. I mean, all of those guys, I loved them back in the day. Joe Gibbs was the coach when they won those Super Bowls. And, I used to have all this Riggo stuff. Riggo used to have all this. He used to wear camo all the time, so I would dress up in camo. And I think I had a shirt that said like Riggo's Rangers or something like that. I was, it was a big deal back in the day. I cannot tell you what it was like growing up in D.C. when the Redskins were just winning those Super Bowls and lighting it up.
So if I was back in that day, we had arch enemies, because back then in the 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s, I was a Texas boy and I liked the Cowboys.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you were to ask me who was my favorite Redskin player, it would have been Riggins, because I played football, and unlike you, I was a natural athlete and not real smart. So I played high school football at 300 pounds and was an all-state lineman.
300 pounds?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
I used to say 300 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. And
you were like Friday Night Lights.
Yes, I loved Ed Too Tall Jones. I wore 72 my whole career because of Too Tall Jones.
He was the best.
And, it's funny about Riggins and my wife, Ebony, when you see her next, and I know we get to hang out some, her favorite number is 44. So you can tell her, say, hey.
There you go.
Riggins, that was his thing. Because, and actually, the Commanders now are going to be playing the Dolphins in Madrid, and me and you should go.
We should go. I'm in. I'm in on this. We'll do the shows we'll do our podcast from Madrid.
From over there. We can do a Substack from over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we're running short on time, so now I'm going to ask you some questions about, I know you liked music, and I knew you were a rock and roll guy in high school. So my next question for you, moving from sports, so folks and the folks on the Substack can get to know the part of you don't talk about on these fancy shows is,
oh, man.
Tell me the first concert you ever went to.
I believe it was Genesis at RFK Stadium. Yeah. Yeah. It was Genesis. This was way back in the day. These are the days of the cassettes. Yeah. Yeah. I was definitely a big Genesis fan back in
Phil
those days.
Collins.
I think Phil Collins. And I think there was might have been a Van Halen concert in there. Anyway, I mean, I really became much more of a rock fan, like when U2 came along in the 90s. I definitely got into the grunge stuff. But yeah, I believe Genesis was the first concert, unless my mom was a huge rock and roll. She was a child of the 70s, 60s and 70s. And I mean, I've got all of her old albums behind me. Like she recently gave me all her old albums. This Elton John.
God, and I love that Elton John album.
I've got so much stuff. The Eagles.
I loved it.
She gave me a bunch of these. If you ever want to come over, we can just listen to records. But I've got all of her old records. I've got about 200 or 300 of her old records. So I grew up a big classic rock. She was a huge Jimmy Buffett fan. I grew up on Jimmy Buffett. I can almost sing every Jimmy Buffett song by heart because if like the song comes on, if Margaritaville comes on, I have to start, singing Margaritaville. But honestly, like, I mean, I grew up like just immersed in rock and roll and that kind of era of music.
My mother loved the Eagles. My mother loved Linda Ronstadt.
Oh yeah, my mom too. Yep.
And Linda Ronstadt was Latina. People don't know that.
That's right.
Linda Ronstadt. And if you were to say to me, you only have one album to listen to the rest of your life, it's probably the Eagles' greatest hits album.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Honestly, that's a good one. I would have to say U2 Joshua Tree for me.
That's a great one. It's in that top 5.
That's one for me for sure. I got to see U2 at the Sphere. What was it, 2 Decembers ago? And that changed my life. That was the best concert I've ever seen. And not to do a commercial for the Sphere or anything, I'm not endorsing it or anything like that. But it was a fantastic music experience. It was unreal. And I heard the Eagles did the Sphere too. I didn't get to see that. That would have been cool too.
The country singer who does the big stadium tours, that does a lot of the Buffett stuff, is doing a residency at the Sphere right now. My sister just went this week. I'm just drawing a blank. I'm gonna play the song from the first concert I ever went to, and I'm going to see if you can hear it and see if you can tell me if you remember this song from high school, because I think I'm a little older than you.
A little bit.
Sister Christian, all the time has come. Sister Christian from
That's
Night
a great
Ranger.
song. Night Ranger. Oh my God.
First concert in the
That was your first concert? Oh my,
Texas.
That's a classic, man. Night Ranger. That's going back a ways.
It was a big controversy in Tyler because a naked woman ran out on stage. Now, keep in mind, I was in the heart of the Bible Belt. It was literally our Coliseum. Our little venue was called the Oil Palace. Let's start there, the Oil Palace.
Yeah.
And they had a naked woman run out on stage, and it was all over the front page of the newspaper. So I knew you liked rock, but I didn't know if it was like the 70s, the 80s, 90s rock, or if it was old school rock. But I'm starting to get a picture now. This would have been another standard when I was in high school. That also, and when I think about rock and roll, this is one of those songs.
Okay. Oh.
Slash.
Little GNR.
Because when I think about having hair and I think about being in high school, I'm like, it was those bands where I think the kids today who are just like down.
I love music, that shit.
Yeah, I think that those records and those cassettes where you would sit there and wait for the radio to record it on your cassette thing.
I used to love it. No, and we used to make the mixtapes. Remember, if you had a girlfriend and you really liked her a lot, you'd make her a mixtape, and you have to hit play and then play record, and then you'd have to like pause and then put a new song in. And it was like, you had to be kind of a surgeon back in those days. This is the shit that we used to do when we didn't have cell phones. Thank God. Can you imagine if we had iPhones back in the day?
Me and you would have never, I'd have never been able to run a campaign, and you'd have never been on TV.
No, No. There
There's
a
all
lot
the stupid shit you do when you're a kid. Now kids just record it. I think nobody recorded me when I was doing that stuff.
I got some photo albums with a bunch of crazy shit in it, but that's about it. And those are in my possession. So it's not like it's on the internet, you know?
Yes. When you work out, when you run, what's the rock and roll song? And this is the last music question. Like, what is your go-to motivation song?
Ooh, gosh.
I know you like the Joshua Tree, but I don't know if that's a workout song.
No, it's not. I mean, sometimes Beautiful Day, by U2 that's a good one. But man, oh man, I kind of bounce around quite a bit. I do a lot of like poppy modern stuff. I like early 2000s Death Cab for Cutie. I do put on Pearl Jam sometimes when I'm working out. I get very eclectic. I sometimes, I'll put on, a little House of Pain, Jump Around, like I go back in those days, Beastie Boys.
I love how everybody in the comments right now are dropping in their go-to music. This is awesome. Run DMC.
Run DMC for sure. But like Beastie Boys, Intergalactic Planetary, that I used to play that all the time when I would work out, all the time. Now, what am I playing now? I guess now it's like Silver Sun pickups and I have so much crazy shit in my iPhone. I don't really have a genre. I have to say, I don't have a genre. My genre is like everything.
I love that. My mother, I grew up listening to old black soul music. My mother loved Linda Ross, the Eagles, but she loved, turn that phone down. She loved Al Green. She loved all of that stuff. But and then I love country music, so I'm as eclectic as you. But if you said what was the one like the rock song that gets you up, I'm going to play the one I like.
Yeah, let me hear that. Oh yeah, that's AC/DC Back in Black, of course.
So if you're for the football game on the football bus with the guys, and you've literally got the old school like big jam box. All kids don't understand what a jam box is, but we had this big thing that we would haul with us. And we would play this music on the bus to the football games. I played football for 9 years.
Yeah.
I was an athlete, so I did track and field. So I was through the discus and the shot put because I weighed 300 pounds.
Oh, man.
I also played church league basketball. And so I was a big old boy. And so I think music and culture, we forget about that because we get so caught up in all of the politics and all the horrible stuff in the world. I like to get away from music. Helps me get away from all the shit coming at me all day.
Totally. I'm a big music guy too. I played all the time and recently got a turntable because my mom gave me her whole record collection. I was like, oh shit, there's like Led Zeppelin in there. There's like Stevie Wonder. She had great musical taste too. She was all over the place too with her musical taste. So I think I might have gotten that from her. But as we try to get our good traits from our moms, right? That's what we try to do.
Absolutely. And me and Ebony are definitely coming over. I want to listen to the music.
Let's do it.
Jim, I want to thank you for taking the time. And y'all look forward in November with me and Jim going to reunite on the Substack in Madrid.
Oh yeah.
For the Commanders and Dolphins game.
Love it.
And we'll get together way before then. But, Jim, I appreciate you. And for all of you out there, don't forget to like and subscribe, not only Jim's Substack, but the Rocha Revolution, my Substack. We're going to do this as much as we can. I wanted to create a space where we wasn't always just talking about politics or all the bad shit going on in the world. We kind of get to know each other a little bit better. And I really appreciate you all listening.
See you, Chuck. Thanks a lot, man.